Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. When Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader arrived in the Ryloth system in 14 BBY for a routine inspection, Cham Syndulla, leader of the Free Ryloth movement, targeted the Imperial Star Destroyer they were on in one of the most audacious assassination attempts in early Imperial history. His entire ragtag group of fighters were poorly armed, and the entire Ryloth system couldn't even muster enough ships to take out just one single Star Destroyer. But Cham Syndulla had been a veteran of the Clone Wars. He fought against the Confederacy of Independent Systems and their separatist droid army, which had been sent to Ryloth to occupy and enslave the local inhabitants. After the Clone Wars ended, Cham Syndulla had collected a large assortment of discarded separatist military hardware, including space mines, buzz droids, vulture droids, and droid tri-fighters. This swarm of automated killing machines was enough to stop Emperor Palpatine's Star Destroyer, the Perilous, dead in its tracks. The Twi'lek resistance movement clearly lacked the manpower and resources to achieve such a feat alone. It found itself an equalizer by deploying a massive droid army to confront the Imperial threats. My question today is, why didn't the wider Rebel Alliance adopt similar tactics to defeat the Empire? Droid soldiers have many advantages to them that are especially relevant for an organization like the Rebel Alliance. For one, the Rebel Alliance lacked manpower but was relatively well funded by rich donors, which means that the Rebel Alliance could probably afford to buy a large droid army and use it to effectively increase their operational capacity. Droids also put less of a strain on the logistics department as well. They only really needed power and some light maintenance. They didn't really require food, shelter, or recreation. Droids could also operate in much more dangerous environments, like ones with a toxic atmosphere, underwater, in extreme temperatures, and even in space. They're also a lot easier and cheaper to train. While no soldier should ever be wasted, sentient or not, droid soldiers are much easier to sacrifice to achieve mission objectives. The type of missions the Rebel Alliance take on are usually limited by the fact that they don't want to expose their members to grave danger and unsurvivable situations. If you have a bunch of droid soldiers, this no longer is as large of a problem. The Rebel Alliance will be able to orchestrate far more suicide missions that were designed to keep the Empire unbalanced and spread thin. Remember guys, the Rebel Alliance does not need a strategic victory over the Empire, they just need to last long enough in this war of attrition to convince enough citizens to join their cause. So one of the major issues with the utilization of droids was the fact that most people in the galaxy held very negative views on droids post-Clone Wars. If you guys remember in the original Star Wars, when Luke, R2, and C-3PO walk into the Mos Eisley Cantina, the barman tells Luke to leave his droids outside. This was strictly because the barman had lost his parents during the Clone Wars to separatist battle droids. He was so pissed off at battle droids that he even installed a droid detector at the door to prevent any of them from coming in. Most of the heaviest fighting of the Clone Wars was centered around the Outer Rim, and so anti-droid sentiment was the strongest in these areas, which also happened to be the places where the Rebel Alliance operated the most as well. On top of that, the performance of the Separatist droid army was not all that inspiring during the Clone Wars. I mean, most people had no idea that Count Dooku, the leader of the Separatist Alliance, was also working alongside the Republic Chancellor, but the battle droids were seen as inferior and much more predictable than human soldiers on the battlefield. This view was mainly shaped by the poorly designed B-1 battle droid that was the most prevalent model used during the war. Compared to the elite clone trooper, they never really stood a chance. But this was an unfair comparison, as the clone trooper was far more skilled than the stormtrooper as well. The Empire also tried to push their own anti-droid propaganda. The Empire used droids like property and encouraged the use of restraining bolts to keep them in check. Some Rebel Alliance fighters like to treat their droids like sentient life, which might be also why there was a negative view towards deploying large armies of droids. When the Clone Wars broke out, the Confederacy of Independent Systems was well positioned for war and conflict from an industrial standpoint. Between the various mega-conglomerates that ran the High Separatist Council, you had enough manufacturing and raw resources to build a military-industrial complex overnight. The Trade Federation would provide the logistics and transport, the Techno-Union would provide the raw resources and manufacturing, and the Intergalactic Banking Clan would print the credits necessary for such a large project. When the Battle of Geonosis occurred, the Separatist battle droids were ready for action and had already been tested in previous battles. The Confederacy of Independent Systems had a very steady supply chain built for creating droids, and it was stable until the very last year of the war. The Rebel Alliance, on the other hand, found themselves in the middle of a hostile galaxy. Most civilized regions were Imperial-controlled, or at least monitored by the Empire. Most Rebel bases that were semi-permanent were placed on remote worlds like Hoth, Yavin, or Crate, far away from busy hyperspace lanes and industrial supply lines. To start a droid manufacturing operation from the ground up would require a lot of manpower, a lot of resources, and also a lot of ships, which would easily be detected by the Imperial Intelligence Agency, or ISB. And even if the Rebellion was able to set up some large droid workshop, the second it was understood that the Rebel Alliance was self-manufacturing droids, the Empire would make it key to target this operation, find it, and destroy it. The risk of setting up so much infrastructure without having the means to actually defend it would be incredibly stupid. And in almost every case when the Empire discovered the Rebel base, the Rebels had no choice but to run away or die fighting. The key to the Rebel Alliance's survival was always mobility, and so recruiting organic soldiers was seen as a better alternative than having some droid soldier manufacturing pipeline that could easily be targeted and would also drain a lot of resources. The Rebellion could just skip the whole process of setting up a supply chain and manufacturing their own droids. They could just steal them from Imperial warehouses where they usually stored Separatist battle droids. The Rebellion was famous for stealing from the Empire. They stole old Y-Wings and even entire Nebulon B-class frigates. Rebel cells like Cham Syndulla and many others have been known to reprogram droids and then turn them against the Empire, but usually this was done in a small scale and usually as a last resort kind of thing. Rebels could also potentially buy droids from manufacturers, but in the Imperial era, any type of military hardware purchased would be heavily monitored. You also have to trust that the manufacturer doesn't have a backdoor open to your droids you just bought. This is why self-manufacturing is more ideal. If the Empire found out that you were buying droids from one manufacturer, they could potentially just go to that manufacturer and tell them to shut down your entire army. This is how the Separatist Alliance was able to end the war. They broadcasted a kill signal to their entire droid army. The Rebel Alliance will also probably have to assume that the Empire has better tech and a lot more slicers on their side who could break into their security systems and compromise their entire droid army. This is actually one of the main reasons why the Republic and the Empire never used droids on a large scale for the military operations. We know that Imperial intelligence has even infiltrated the Rebellion on numerous occasions during the Galactic Civil War using droids. There was apparently even an Imperial spy droid hiding on the Tantive 4 in the beginning of the first Star Wars film. The Separatist battle droids were perfect for the massive battlefields of the Clone Wars, but the Rebel Alliance was fighting a very different war against the Galactic Empire, and mass-producing droids was just not something that was in their capability. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about my interpretation on why the Rebels didn't use droids. Maybe you have other reasons that I didn't go over. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.